Cool. We are about to start our January webinar for Restart CBD on THCV, which is a emerging cannabinoid that has come to the market pretty hot and heavy. I'm going to give it a couple more minutes and wait for some people to tune in. But this is our first time live streaming on Facebook as well. I know there's an option to live stream on YouTube. So this is new. So if you're tuning in from YouTube, hello. If you're tuning in from Facebook, hello. Nice to connect with you guys. I appreciate you taking the time to be here to educate yourself on this new emerging cannabinoid. So I'm going to go ahead and start sharing my screen. And then let's view. Okay, perfect. So I am a little nervous because the weather is changing here in Austin, which is where I'm based, and we are experiencing a little bit of a cold freeze. So it's been interesting to just kind of wake up and like yesterday it was like 80 degrees and today it's unfortunately 30 degrees. So we're adjusting. I'm going to give it one more minute and then I'm just going to go ahead and begin. But I appreciate you guys being here today and tuning in and educating yourself on THCV. Hello, hello. Welcome to the webinar on THCV. Appreciate you guys tuning in and showing up to educate yourself on a new cannabinoid that, in my opinion, is pretty interesting. I've been enjoying THCV personally myself. So this research portion that I went through to kind of pull together for the webinar was also really enlightening because I think in the world of cannabis, sometimes we look for more research and sometimes that doesn't always exist. But when it comes to THCV, there's actually a lot of research available to us. So I'm excited to show you some studies that I found, as well as just educate you on this new cannabinoid. Okay, it's officially top of the hour. I am a very prompt person, so I'm going to get right into things. So welcome to the webinar on enhancing your fitness goals with THCV. If you're kind of like fitness goals, what does that mean? We're for sure going to get into that as we go through the presentation, but I am Shayda Tarabi. I'm the co-founder of Restart CBD. We are a women-owned, sister-owned CBD brand based in Austin, Texas. And this is who we are. We are founded by three sisters. Our brand was founded in 2018. So we were one of the first to market, one of the first operators here in Texas. I won Best Educator, Influencer, and Advocate by the Texas Hemp Awards. So very proud of, getting the opportunity to get to exist in this industry and help be an influencer, an educator, an advocate on behalf of cannabis. Restart CBD was voted by a best CBD shop by the Austin American Statesman and the Chronicle, and we're the #1 rated shop on Yelp and Google. So I say this to give you a little bit of insight into who we are, as well as why we're presenting this information to you. We're definitely here to educate and inform you. And we have a great team behind us, as well as a lot of great customers in our community who equally, appreciate the value that we provide as a CBD brand. I also love to mention that we have a physical brick and mortar. So if you're in Austin, we just have one location. We're in North Austin, near the Domain and the brand new FC Stadium. But as always, if you don't live in Austin or you're traveling or you got a friend that you want to try our products, we do ship nationwide. So you can head to our website, restartcbd.com, to shop all of our great products and certainly shop our THCV products. So I always like to start our webinars with this, just kind of like, orient you, because I totally understand what you guys are feeling. I understand where you're coming from. So shopping for cannabis can be overwhelming. What to take, what cannabinoid, how much, what's the best form factor. And so my hope is through these webinars to really empower you and encourage you that it doesn't have to be. So with Restart CBD, we, like I said, really care about educating our community and our consumers and really just the market at large. And so that's really a big driver for us, a big pillar for our brand, a why we wake up in the morning, is to really help you guys understand these cannabinoids. So also like to include a disclaimer, I'm not a doctor, and I do encourage you to do further research on everything that I share. At the end of the presentation, I will provide more resources for you to continue to explore your canna curiosity. But just with that said, these conversations are meant to be a jumping off point. There's so much more information out there. There's new research being done constantly. And I don't want anybody to ever think cannabis is explicit. I'm going to take this product in, I'm going to have X, Y, or Z result. It does vary person to person. And if you've been tuning into our other webinars, they were a little bit more educational on kind of what are cannabinoids, how does cannabinoids and cannabis really work in our body. So if you're like, I really don't understand how this works in my body, check out our YouTube, restartcbd.com/YouTube, for other videos that we've produced. But this one today is going to be all about THCV. So what is THCV? THCV stands for tetrahydrocannabivarin, and it's one of over 100 different cannabinoids found in the cannabis plant. So again, you might be more familiar with CBD versus THC. And so THCV has some similar letters in it, right? But how it works in your body will be a different experience than THC products. And I also want to encourage you, if you're tuning in live right now, please drop questions into the chat box so I can review them at the end. So I don't want you to think that I'm not going to address your questions. I want to make sure that we, answer what we can answer here. And then if you're tuning in to this video as a pre-recording, feel free to reach out to us on social media, DM us on Restart CBD's Instagram. We're more than happy to follow up and answer questions. Also, if you have experiences, I always love to hear how other people are experiencing these particular cannabinoids. So THCV, again, I think when people come to our shop and they engage with us, they're asking, where is THC new? Like, where did it come from? And what I like to always highlight is these cannabinoids are not new. They've existed in the cannabis plant forever, but due to research becoming more increasingly available and the legalization of hemp, you're going to see more of these cannabinoids being marketed and productized, is usually the way that I like to communicate that. So THCV was originally discovered in 1973. It's also been called diet weed for its appetite suppressing properties and weederol for its energy enhancing properties. And so I mentioned that again, not to be explicit, like take this and you're not going to have an appetite, but some people have reported that this particular cannabinoid gives them that effect. And so just wanted to kind of highlight that for you guys. And then also THCV is federally legal as long as it is hemp derived, but with all cannabinoids, there's so much variation in the market. So if you're in Texas, it's legal for now. We'll see what happens. But federally, you need to look at, your state specific laws and see what your locality is really saying about these different cannabinoids. So THCV is a naturally occurring cannabinoid. It can be synthesized completely organically and naturally in the cannabis plant. So again, I want to highlight the word synthesize. Sometimes people think like, oh, if it's a synthetic, that's bad. But understanding that cannabinoids go through synthesis. So earlier I mentioned, THCV has very similar letters to THC. And kind of, if you get that in your mind, you can think, well, how do these cannabinoids convert? So rather than maybe using the word synthesized, you can think of it as, how do these cannabinoids convert to different cannabinoids? So the main reason for the excitement and anticipation around THCV is simply because many people are obviously expecting it to offer valuable medical application. And so I think with all cannabinoids, that's something that, yes, there's research that's being done. Yes, there's more research that needs to be done, but also how does it work in your body is really that sweet spot. So we always encourage our customers to journal, especially if you're trying a new cannabinoid. It sounds really rudimentary, but how much am I taking? What time of day is it? Have I eaten anything else with this product at this time? And kind of keeping track can really help you figure out, well, is it one dropper or two droppers? Is it one gummy or two gummies? And et cetera, and kind of go from there. So most known cannabinoids are actually converted, synthesized from cannabigerol. So if you've been in the Restart CBD shop, you've certainly seen that we have CBG products. And so CBG in our cannabis world, sometimes CBG is referred to as the mother of all cannabinoids. So it's a compound found in all forms of cannabis, so hemp and marijuana. And CBG goes through a metabolic process from which CBD, THC, and other cannabinoids are created. However, THCV forms after the joining of, and I don't expect you guys to really fully, understand this. And if I'm being honest, this is a little bit foreign language to me as well. Deveronolic acid and geranyl phosphate, but the resulting is THCV is a decarboxylate to create THCV. CBGV converts to THCVA, which eventually becomes THCV when exposed to heat or light. Again, to kind of paraphrase that down for you guys, sometimes when you look at cannabis, like in the flower form, you think that it's active, like in that form. And the reality is these cannabinoids to become active have to be exposed. They have to be like turned on, which is why when you're smoking a joint, you light it with fire, heat. That heat is what's activating those cannabinoids for you to inhale. When you're consuming oil or edible products, those contain cannabinoids that have already been decarboxylated. And so decarboxylation is a fancy word for heat. It's got to be heated up, it's got to be activated. And so that's really how these conversions are happening through heat and light. So now I want to kind of really emphasize what is the difference between THC and THCV, because again, they have very similar naming structures. So if you look over here on the right side, this is what THCV looks like. And the main place to focus is on this bond over here. And then on this one, you're going to see how these have a little bit longer tail on THC. So THCV is closely related to THC, and they have a very similar makeup. As you can tell, if you ignore these tails, they're pretty much identical, right? So THC has a side chain with 5 carbon atoms. So if you're counting this as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, versus THCV is 1, 2, 3. So they have a difference in 2 carbon atoms. And that small difference in the chemical makeup does have big differences in how the body's going to metabolize and use them. So again, kind of some of the research, which I have some studies, which we'll get into later in this presentation, but just to kind of like paraphrase it and highlight it for you. THC usually, if you are someone who's consumed, marijuana or THC products in your lifetime, usually you feel your appetite stimulated, you get the munchies. That's usually what THC is associated with. Now, THCV is kind of coming to market as being the opposite of that. So again, this difference in these carbon atoms is really what's giving these cannabinoids these different effects. And so that's why people are noticing appetite suppression with THCV. Also, a point is THC is very psychotropic. You feel high when you're, consuming Delta 9 THC or Delta 8 THC, or you're smoking marijuana, versus THCV is thought to be less psychoactive. And so just a little bit of chemical structure variation can cause these deviation in effects for these cannabinoids. And then the last little point I wanted to mention, some studies have shown that THCV can limit the effects of THC. So if you're someone who's been shopping with Restart for a while, or maybe you've listened to some of our content, we've certainly shared before, so I'll reiterate it again. CBD also acts as a decreaser to the effects of THC. So sometimes you might get a little too high, you ate an edible and it was too potent for you and you were having an adverse effect. Kind of, word on the street is, and due to some studies, you can take CBD and it will help decrease and stabilize that high. Same thing with THCV now. So if you over consume, you can always, attempt to try THCV to help suppress that high as well, which is a pretty cool realization. I want to bring this slide up. If you've tuned into our other webinars, like I mentioned, we really went deep on actually the endocannabinoid system and how cannabinoids function and what are terpenes and all these things. But I'm bringing this slide just to kind of use it as a reference point for you to understand these different cannabinoids, they respond to different receptors. So if you are a cannabinoid that responds to the CB1 receptor, it really affects these things: motor activity, thinking, appetite, short-term memory, pain perception, versus if it's a CB2 receptor, it's affecting your gut, kidneys, skeletal muscle, bone, tumors, skin, cardiovascular system. And so THCV acts as an antagonist of the CB1 receptor in low doses, which means you won't experience a high, but when you increase the dose, something strange happens and THCV switches behavior and acts as a CB antagonist, activating the CB1 and CB2 receptors like THC, which means you will get intoxicated. So I just want to kind of highlight, this to me helps map: when I consume this product, why does it work? Sometimes we think, when I take aspirin, how does it know to go to my elbow if I have a sore elbow versus my neck if I have a sore neck? Similarly, cannabis, through these cannabinoids, goes to work based on the receptors that it triggers. And so that's why you might have an effect that's more focused on appetite or pain versus skin and, feeling like your intestinal tract. And so it's just trying to understand. My hope for you, again, to reiterate, is these are all points for which I encourage you to do more research. I encourage you to go Google, what is an endocannabinoid system? How does CBD work in my endocannabinoid system? How does THCV work in my endocannabinoid system? So you can fully understand this. This is obviously just like a high level kind of touch point in the narrative of what is THCV. But again, I want to highlight it for you so you understand, when you're consuming these cannabinoids, this is why they're going to affect in your body. But then it really comes down to how much you're consuming, what is the quality of that cannabinoid, as well as what is the form factor. So, eating it and digesting it versus smoking it will have different effects, absolutely, as well. So now we're going to get into a little bit of, the topic of how we look at THCV as an actual, tool for our fitness and wellness journeys. And I mentioned in the beginning in these past couple slides about THCV being an appetite suppressant, but now we want to actually get into these studies that are indicating why it is being seen that way. So again, to kind of highlight, in the cannabis world, unfortunately, because there's not as much research, we can't be really explicit. And due to like FDA warnings and FTC rulings, Federal Trade Commission and the Federal Drug Administration, we can't say explicitly, take this and this is going to eliminate your appetite. It's not a guarantee always, right? So same thing with like supplements. You have to be really mindful of how you approach things. And so that's what I want to try to emphasize is, there are studies that are done that help provide context for why this particular cannabinoid is being seen that way. There's certainly anecdotal evidence with, yourself if you're consuming these. But I always encourage you to just take everything with a grain of salt. And this is really just meant to educate you and give you, again, further confidence to go do more research and see how these cannabinoids affect your unique bodies. So on the subject of THCV and appetite, one of the main reasons for THCV's effects in this field is that it suppresses the CB1 receptor. So we talked about that CB1 receptor, and a study published in the Journal of Cannabis Research found that THCV decreases appetite, increasing feelings of fullness, and upregulates energy and metabolism. The research concluded that THCV for weight loss showed a lot of promise. And a small weight loss study, also funded by the National Institute of Health in 2021, tested the benefits of Nitro V, a hemp extract microcapsule containing THCV. And at the end of the 90-day trial period, participants who used the extract experienced weight loss without changes to diet or exercise. Again, I never want to paint this as like, this is, the end all be all. This is the magic pill. This is the magic edible to eat. But understanding the science behind these cannabinoids, as well as the research that's been done, can help guide you to figuring out, is this a cannabinoid I want to try, and how is it going to ultimately make my body feel? So in this next slide, I actually pulled the abstract from that study. And so at the end of this, we have your emails. We're going to send out the slides so you can go click and engage with these studies. Also, if you want to Google, you can see this was from PubMed. So again, these are public studies. I just accumulated all this information to present to you in a concise way, but it's exciting that this information exists out there. So I'm not going to read this whole abstract, but that study, just to reinforce it, says the main advantage of THCV over THC is the lack of psychoactive effects. In rodent studies, THCV decreases appetite and increases satiety. I'm thinking it's like satiation, and upregulates energy metabolism, making it a clinically useful remedy for weight loss and management of obesity and type 2 diabetic patients. So if you are someone who is, any of those words I said are like, oh, that's like really interesting to me, I have a family member, I'm trying to navigate something along those lines, this is where I encourage you to try to look at how THCV could fit into your routine of cannabinoid intake and what's the best product to get you there, right? And then just on the same topic of appetite, a human study from 2015 suggested there isn't enough evidence to claim THCV suppresses appetite. The researchers found that 10 milligrams of THCV was enough to affect food reward and aversion. The cannabinoid increased the activation of various brain regions in response to aversive food stimuli and chocolate. However, THCV didn't impact how users perceived a food's pleasantness, nor did it impact the desire for the food stimuli. So, again, when I kind of look at this study, my goal is to never make you feel like, oh, cannabis is like always going to do what it says it's going to do. The reality is it's not going to work the way it works for everybody's body. And I think this study highlights that there isn't necessarily enough evidence to claim that it's going to suppress appetite. But what I loved and I wanted to point out for you guys was a dosing recommendation, right? So I think sometimes we're always looking for, well, what's the right amount to take? And really, what's too much? And how is my body going to feel? And really quickly, just wanted to highlight, so this is one of our products, which I'll highlight later as well, but these are our THCV gummies. Our THCV gummies have 2.4, I was gonna say 2.5 milligrams of THCV and per gummy and some other cannabinoids. So 4 milligrams of CBD and 4 milligrams of CBDV, which is another cannabinoid. I don't notice really anything when I take one. So I take two, and two is about 5 milligrams. The other day, I was like, let me take three. So that's about 7.5 milligrams. As you can tell, sometimes THCV can cause a little bit of a buzz. When I had that third gummy, I felt a buzz. I personally really enjoyed it. So that's where figuring out, well, is it one gummy? Is it two gummies? Is it three gummies? And then not just how many gummies or how many drops, but what is that dose per gummy or per ml dropper? So that's really where I want you guys to also resonate. Any cannabinoid, you always want to understand how much you're taking and how much is being effective for you. And partially the only way to really explore that is to be comfortable enough to kind of try it in your own bodies. And so that's really, again, where we try to exist to help make you feel a little bit kind of curious. You feel confident, you feel comfortable. So again, to highlight with this one, I just wanted you to think of like, okay, well, 10 milligrams seems to be a good dose to test out, up to 10 milligrams, right? So it's kind of like, drawing a line in the sand that gives you a little playground to navigate and play around in. And then this is that same study. So again, this was coming from the National Institute of Health, and the study was on neural effects of cannabinoids CB1 neutral antagonist, THCV on food reward and aversion in healthy volunteers. The conclusion was our findings are the first to show that treatment with the CB1 neutral antagonist THCV increases neural responding to rewarding and aversive stimuli. This effect profile suggests therapeutic activity in obesity, perhaps with a lowered risk of depressive side effects. So again, just trying to present these studies to you so you can make decisions for yourself with some proof from science that is giving you, again, a kind of guide to navigate forward. It's not just like, oh, here's THCV and like have fun with it. It's like, no, there's literally studies that have been done that are helping to make sense of this cannabinoid's medicinal benefits and how it can help our unique bodies, whatever we're trying to navigate, right? Another aspect of THCV, I feel like a lot of the cannabinoids play on being anti-inflammatory. And I think that's because when you look at the CB1 and CB2 receptors, there's really only two options, right? And depending on the cannabinoid, it's kind of like a 50-50 chance that it's going to actually be helpful in that capacity. But there have been studies on THCV for inflammation. So this is a study published in the British Journal of Pharmacology in 2010, found that THCV reduces swelling and pain in mice. These are two of the main symptoms of inflammation after exposure to inflammatory chemicals. This is a sign that THCV activates cannabinoid receptors. During the study, the mice received THCV after inflammatory exposure each day for 4 consecutive days. The scientists found that the compound reduced inflammation in the mice, did not build up a tolerance. So what I want to kind of mention from a takeaway perspective for this too is the consecutive aspect of it. We get asked a lot of times, oh, well, I worked out and my body's inflamed today, or, oh, I'm about to go public speak. I'm really anxious when I go do that. Can cannabis work kind of situationally? And I usually refer to it as transactionally. I'm feeling anxious. I want to take cannabis. It will reduce my anxiety. It can work in that capacity, but my preference, my belief, my understanding from everything that I've kind of explored is that cannabis does work best when you are consistently taking it. Now, I'll mention consistency doesn't always mean I'm taking the same cannabinoids in the same dose every day. You definitely want to be consistent to some extent. So for me, I've really enjoyed taking Thcv gummies every day. I take 2 gummies in the morning. I don't mind taking them before my workout. Sometimes I take them after my workout, but always in the morning. And that's just something that I found works for me. When it comes to CBD, I know my dose. I take it daily, but some days I might be more inflamed, so I'll take more. Some days I'm less inflamed, so maybe I'm not taking quite as much. Consistency is really where I think if you're someone who's like, I don't know if this really works for me, or you have a family member or a friend and they're like, CBD doesn't really work, or cannabis, I didn't really notice it. I really encourage you to encourage them to practice being consistent. And that's for like journaling, right? Maybe practice being consistent for 2 weeks, a week. Give yourself some definitive time frame and practice and see what is happening and document it and see if you notice a difference. Because I think from there, then too, as like educators in the space, as like business owners in the space, me and my team can help you if we understand what has been working or what's not working to kind of guide you into other cannabinoids or doses or consumption methods. But if you're like, I tried it and it didn't work, I have questions of how much were you taking? What was the consumption method? How often were you taking it, to really get down to the root of why something was or wasn't working for you. And so this study is the plant cannabinoid delta 9 THCV can decrease signs of inflammation and inflammatory pain in mice. And then this is pulled from that study's website. And again, I just wanted to highlight the conclusion and implications. THCV can activate CB2 receptors in vitro and decrease signs of inflammation and inflammatory pain in mice, partly via CB1 and or CB2 receptor activation. So I also like to think of these cannabinoids as building blocks. And so when I think of how our bodies function with our endocannabinoid systems, I think of it as like, let's say THCV is a square peg and my cannabinoid receptors are square holes. And so when those squares get put into those holes, they're able to activate, they're able to like connect. And so that's kind of also a key to understanding how these cannabinoids work. It's like which receptor is which cannabinoid going to fit into, and once it fits into it, what is that outcome? And so again, it's really a variation because of your biochemistry, because of your dose, because of your diet, because of, quality of these cannabinoids. What I will mention though, for people, maybe they haven't heard this before, but cannabis is fat soluble. So our bodies sometimes retain fat more than others. You can imagine, depending on your body's ability to store fat, you might absorb more or need more just depending on that, or what your diet is, if you have a really, fatty diet. So keep that in mind. Also, if you're consuming cannabis, like in chocolate, we notice chocolate enrobes the cannabinoids and it makes them absorb a little bit more potently. So just yesterday, I was talking to a customer and he's like, I feel it way more when I have chocolate. I'm like, that's because chocolate is very fatty. So, little things like that can help you understand, hey, when I take this product, it makes me feel more or less. Well, maybe this is why. Here's a couple other, things to highlight about THCV that have studies actually associated to them. So Thcv and Tremors, if you've been following kind of CBD's journey at a federal level and certainly at a state level, CBD really kind of hit the market as being a great resource for patients dealing with epilepsy. So dealing with tremors and shaking and epilepsy in particular. And so when THCV had this study done, this is a study on delta 9 THCV suppresses in vitro epileptiform and in vitro seizure activity in adult rats. Sometimes science words are very hard, aren't they? But another benefit that we have research to back is THCV's ability to suppress tremors associated with illnesses such as ALS, multiple sclerosis, and Parkinson's disease. Scientific research also supports the fact that THCV can reduce seizures associated with epilepsy. Moreover, research indicates that THCV could reduce not only the frequency, but also the severity of seizures when they occur. A study in the Epilepsia Journal found that THCV worked when taken during a seizure as well as prior to seizures as a preventative measure. This is really impactful because it's obviously kind of giving some indication as well of like THCV worked when taken during a seizure. So if you or a family member or a friend is dealing with epilepsy, for example, my cousin is epileptic, and being able to understand that this isn't necessarily an end all be all, certainly, but knowing that the alternative is medication and trying to find a balance between being on medication and also trying to look for more natural ways to combat some of these things. Reading that this journal highlights that THC works when taken during a seizure as well as prior to seizures as a preventative measure. That's where it gets into consistency. You might not feel the effects of THCV because you're taking it every day, but also realizing what it is helping prevent, right? And so I think that's the really powerful thing about cannabis that I really appreciated over the years is as all these research and reports come out, I'm like, man, I'm a big cannabis consumer. I hope I can ward off some of these things just by being consistent and regular with my cannabis cannabinoid intake and dosage, right? So kind of switching to the other side of the screen, THCV and diabetes. There's also evidence that THCV may help those who suffer from diabetes. In 2013, the Nutrition and Diabetes Journal studied THCV's potential effects on type 2 diabetes in mice. The study found that THCV produced an increase in energy expenditure and reduced glucose intolerance in obese mice. THCV also increased insulin sensitivity in the mice with diabetes. The study concluded that THCV may be a treatment against obesity-associated glucose intolerance. Another study in 2016 found that THCV improved pancreatic cell function in patients with type 2 diabetes. And this study was the efficacy and safety of CBD and THCV on glycemic and lipid parameters in patients with type 2 diabetes, a randomized, double-blind, placebo-controlled parallel group pilot study. So again, if you are dealing with any of these things or you have family members or friends, my hope is that you will feel encouraged that cannabis is not the end all be all, but it can be a step in helping plant-based, natural way of helping provide relief and remedies for some of these situations. And by being educated, you are now empowered with information. I really believe in the one-to-one effect. So like me getting to talk to you guys, you are then going to go off into your own world and go be these beacons of information and education. And that's just like such a joy to me because I really believe that cannabis is a really powerful plant, but it's really stigmatized, right? And so the more people that can go into their communities, into their families, into their dinner tables, happy hours with their friends and bring up, hey, I joined this webinar and I learned this thing. Maybe it can help someone else on their journey of healing and finding relief with cannabis as well. Again, I like to keep it real with you guys. So does THCV have negative effects? I think with all cannabinoids, kind of like the industry rule of thumb or joke is like, well, nobody's died from cannabis yet. And like, cannabis has been at least in the black market available for as long as time can tell. But I don't really think that that's the best way to approach it, certainly as we are looking at cannabis from a health related perspective. And so the reality is there isn't enough research to determine the answer right now. Appetite suppression is a THCV side effect. And so I also wanted to highlight it's something that I don't want to ever feel someone to feel a pressure of like losing weight or being a certain size. And certainly with individuals who are dealing with eating disorders, this is not something that I really am trying to encourage us like, do this so that you can become skinny. That's really not the purpose of this at all. But really anyone who falling into that category should. So if you have friends who are considering using this for that, I would say just like, please don't. That's really not the intended purpose, but more so, I think what I hear is people who have used THC, Delta 9 or Delta 8, and they're like, I always get the munchies. I don't want to feel that way when I consume cannabis. Looking at THCV as a way to experience maybe some of that buzz without feeling that inclination to like want to go, snack on some snacks. But if you use THCV, it's wise to begin with no more than 10 milligrams, like that other study mentioned. So this is a dosage potentially capable of reducing, like we mentioned earlier as well, THC side effects. It is mildly intoxicating, probably 25% as strong as Delta 9 THC, and provides a clear-headed high. So I notice when I take THCV, I feel it just kind of in my head. I never feel it like in my full body. It gives me that focus. And I really enjoy it as someone who's like grown up really enjoying Delta 9 THC and cannabis in general. This has been something that I don't feel high or psychotropic on by any means, but I do feel a little bit of a buzz. And so that's why I like 2 gummies. When I hit that 3rd gummy, that's when I was like, this is a little buzzy. And I don't know if I want to be on this presently, but that's where you're trying to figure out what is my body responding to best. So, my fiance's mom was texting me. She has some of our THCV and she's like, I tried one. I don't know if I really felt anything. I was like, try 2. So again, that's just where journaling, documenting, figuring out what works best for you is really the most important piece in this whole puzzle. And I hope that by this education on what is THCV, it just encourages you more to do more research, both online with your friends, peer journals, study reports, as well as with the products themselves to see what's my body going to respond to. And then this is just to highlight. So we at Restart do have some THCV products. I know that people were asking us for a while when we were going to get this cannabinoid, and we have it now. So I have a few different options. I have a 3rd product, which is a THCV oil. I know some people are like, well, I don't want to eat a gummy to try THCV. And I totally hear you. My preference is I've tried the oil and I tried the gummies. I didn't really notice the oil as much as I noticed the gummies. So I am someone who's really health minded, but I kind of cap it. I'm like, this is going to be my 2 little gummy sweets for the day. And I'm going to just take my little, THCV supplements. But we do have them in sour gummies as well as organic gummies. I have them in 15 packs as well as 30 packs. We have these in store. We have them on our website, restartcbd.com. So I just wanted to highlight, if you're like, I would like to try THCV, these are the products. These are my organic gummies. I have them. And like I said, I took 2 this morning before I did this presentation, and I feel wonderful. So just wanted to mention that. And then now just getting into additional resources, because we really, truly do care about encouraging and empowering you guys to continue to learn. So if you have questions specific that we don't get to answer today, or you have a thought later on, feel free to reach out. info@restartcbd.com is a great resource to contact us and check in with our team. And then the other one is our Secret Restart CBD Facebook group. If you go to Facebook and you just type in Secret Restart CBD group, it's just a private group that we have that we can encourage and empower our community to share transparently. Hey, I tried this product and I had this effect, or hey, I'm thinking about trying this product. Has anybody had any experience? And it's a great peer-to-peer way to have that conversation. Always talk to our team. So I mentioned our email, but if you want to come shop with us in store, this is some of my beautiful staff members, and my team is just as smart, if not smarter than me. And they love talking to our customers and our community, and they are always ready to answer your questions. So when you come in the store, when you shop online, we have a chat on our website during business hours that you can engage and actually talk to a real human being and ask them questions, or come into our shop, literally ask us questions, come and see us. We're in North Austin. We would love to talk to you, or pick up the phone and call us too. Our numbers on the internet. This is also a free resource. We're so honored to be a partner of Leaf 411. This is a free cannabis nurse hotline. I like to look at it like we are cannabis experts, but we are not medical professionals. They are medical professionals who are becoming cannabis experts. And so together we can help empower the conversation a little bit more. They do have now kind of shifted the way things are working. So we have a special code. They're just getting such an influx of calls that now, as a member, we have a special code that you can give them. And so if you're interested in contacting Leaf 411 and getting some questions answered, anything cannabis medical related, I would love to empower you with that code. So just ask us at info@restartcbd.com and we will happily share that. And then I just like to highlight some customer testimonials just to kind of, remind you guys that our customers are our biggest supporters and encouragers, and they are who we are doing this for. You are who we are doing this for. Briefly, my story about cannabis, you might know, you might not know this, but I was in a car accident in 2015. I was hit by a vehicle as a pedestrian and I fractured my pelvis in 2 places. And that was really the opening of my mind and my awareness of cannabis beyond just marijuana, beyond just getting high. My mother is actually who introduced me to CBD. Again, 2015, there was certainly not a market. There was nobody doing webinars. I was like, what am I taking? What is this? But my mother actually was making us our original formulations, and that's what we launched Restart CBD with. So this this business is very near and dear to my heart, not just because I get to be in business with my family, not just because I get to be a leader in the Austin business world, not just because I get to be a leader in the cannabis conversation, but because I found relief with these products, and I really want other people to find the same kind of encouragement and relief with cannabis. And it's not that, again, it's the end all be all, but it's a step in that journey, right, to finding relief. And so, yeah, I just appreciate you guys taking time to be a part of this webinar today, and encourage you to drop some questions in the chat so that we can go through them. But also, before I get to the Q&A, I wanted to mention our next webinar. So our webinars are every month on the 3rd Thursday at noon. So a little lunch and learn. And the next one is on the new cannabinoid on the market, hemp-derived Delta-9 THC. If you are familiar with marijuana and THC and the psychotropic effect, Delta-9 is that cannabinoid that is responsible for that high. And now, thanks to some very creative formulations, people are now able to actually derive it from hemp and put those products on the market. So if you've shopped with us, we have some D9 products in our shop and our website. But this webinar will give you a little bit more ins and outs of what is it? Where did it come from? Is it legal? How do I consume it? What's available to me? And so I encourage you to go to restartcbd.com/webinar, and that has the new webinar information already up on it. But thank you so much. I appreciate you guys being here, and I'm going to open it up for a couple of questions now. And yeah, if you have any, please drop them in. So let's stop screen sharing. I'm going to go into the chat. So I'm just going to repeat some of these things. Thank you, Greg. He says, love the anti-inflammatory components of the cannabinoids. And yes, especially with consistency. So yeah, just kind of reiterating with you guys, I think, yes, you can experience cannabis transactionally, meaning like, I feel bad, I want to feel better. But really, I think the way that you'll feel the most effects with cannabis is when you are consistent with it. So just a reminder on that. And then someone says, when trying out THCV specifically for appetite suppression, do you suggest stopping all THC consumption for a little to see the effects? Or how do THC and THCV work when consumed together or within the same day? Really great question, Brittany. I wish I had, like the scientific answer for you. Unfortunately, I think that it's a little bit of like anecdotal from what I've observed personally. So for me, I don't take my THC products in the daytime. I give myself like to the evening to take my THC products, but I take my THCV products in the daytime. So I don't personally mix them, because I do think that potentially the THC would still activate your appetite. So even if you took THCV, if you're on THC, it would still activate your appetite. And I do think kind of with everything new, cannabis or, new supplements, you always want to kind of try to isolate it and see how that cannabinoid makes you feel. So for me, when I'm trying new products, certainly before we put them on the floor, obviously I want to make sure how this cannabinoid is going to work. So I will take a little bit of a break of other cannabinoids. So in this case, I stopped using THC completely for about 48 hours and then tried THCV just to give myself that clarity of like, well, how does this cannabinoid feel by itself without any other inputs? And so it's not right or wrong. I would just say from my personal experience and understanding, I think if you're taking them at the same time, the THC probably will still activate your appetite. So just something to be mindful of. And so maybe just buffering it out different times of day. And really, I like the way THCV makes me feel from a daytime kind of buzz effect that I don't really ever feel like I need to take THC as well. So I hope that that helped kind of answer that question a little bit. And so Tom really quick asked a couple questions that I want to address. So he Missed a couple of the first minutes of the presentation, which no problem. And by the way, this presentation will be on YouTube pretty shortly after today. So if you have a friend or family member or somebody that you want to send this to, or you want to just like go over it again, like you can head to our youtube.com/restartcbd, and this thing will be in all of its glory for you to go back and look at. But he asked if I explained how THCV is produced. Is it synthesized from other chemicals in hemp, or is it simply extracted? Are there particular processes that leave less byproducts that I should look for when choosing THCV? So when it comes to THCV, it is a naturally occurring cannabinoid compared to maybe HHC, which is, in my opinion, not a naturally occurring cannabinoid. That is a true synthetic, but it does go through a synthesis process. So it has to convert from CBG to THCV through heat and light and things like that. I don't personally know if people are synthesizing it on the market. Everything that we source is naturally occurring THCV. So I would imagine that there's potentially going to be synthetic THCVs out there. And to be honest, I don't really know what other byproducts could be present. But as always, I think that's where it's really important to make sure who you're sourcing your products from. And so for us, like I mentioned, we've been in this industry. We have this great, customer and community support around us and our products that we really aim to only put high quality products on the shelf. And so I hope you can, at least hear the sincerity in my voice. I'm not going to put anything that I don't fully believe in. But as far as our products are all naturally occurring. And so that is something that I'm happy to do some more research on to figure out, what can customers look into when it comes to differentiating what is the quality of this particular cannabinoid. And then Tom also had a question asking me if I could share my full daily regimen of what I take and why. And yes, I will share kind of what I do on a consistent basis. So for me, I personally really love taking a CBD oil every day. I like CBD because it helps me sleep. And I like CBD because it helps me with my inflammation. And I work out and I lift weights, and I am constantly trying to manage my inflammation and just get the best night's rest. So every night before bed, I take a CBD oil. I do use a higher strength. So at Restart, we have 100 milligram per ml product. And so I will take anywhere from half the dropper at 50 milligrams to 100 milligrams of CBD. I also use our pure CBD. It's not that I don't like full spectrum or I don't believe in full spectrum. I just find that for me, with CBD's properties being mostly anti-inflammatory, that's what I'm looking at when it comes to repairing my body. And so I'm taking a pure oil because it works well for me. So I take every night between 50 and 100 milligrams of CBD oil, sublingual, under my tongue. In the daytime now, I've really been enjoying our THCV gummies. So I take 2 of these every day. I did mention we were recording that I tried 3 the other day just to kind of see what it would do to me. And it gave me for sure a little bit more buzz, but I'm somebody who is really appreciative of the way that cannabis naturally makes me feel. And I can kind of operate with a little bit of a buzz. If you're someone who's like, that's not for me, I got to keep it to the evening just to unwind. There's no right or wrong way to do it. And so for me, those have been kind of my staples, my THCV gummies in the daytime and my CBD oil before bed. But I also really love Delta 9 THC and Delta 8 THC. And depending on how I want to feel, I will interject those in. So I love to smoke. I love to eat edibles. And so again, I have this understanding of when I smoke it, I'll feel it fast. If I want to eat an edible, it might last longer and give me a more delayed effect. So for example, the other night I was vaporizing. I have a herb vaporizer, and to me, herb vaping is a little bit cleaner of a way to consume versus like lighting it with like butane or light, right? Or like heat, like a lighter, right? And so I was using that and I was feeling the buzz from it, but I went to sleep and didn't take my Delta 9 gummy. And even though I took my CBD oil, I still woke up in the middle of the night and I was like, oh my gosh. So I have conditioned myself to kind of have my oil and my edible. And so again, kind of the whole point I want to really articulate is I allow myself to have different cannabinoids in different consumption methods, depending on how I feel and how I want to feel. people, when we first started the business, were like, oh, did you give up THC for CBD? No, I just know when to have CBD and when to have THC, or when to have THC and when to have CBD. Like I said, I love all the different form factors. The other night, I really, I'm dealing with some sciatica from my accident still, and my lower back has really been inflamed. And so I take a CBD bath and I put a CBD topical on. So I know how to interchange these products to give me the effects I'm wanting. So I hope that that answered your question, Mr. Tom. And then let me go back. I got a couple more. Someone is asking if Brittany, or actually, sorry, Taylor saying, I'm wondering if you've tried THCV isolated, and if you had, do you notice a difference between that and the combination? I've read a few personal testimonies that CBDV has a more sociable, talkative, where the THCV gets people more in the zone focus. Really good question. So we are actually working on an isolated THCV product now. I have not had THCV isolated. I've only had it in this ratioed combination. So I'm excited to learn a little bit more, but I think that's a great question just to kind of share with the audience in terms of there's different combinations of cannabinoids. So for example, I have some gummies from Colorado that are a Delta 9 THC, CBD, and CBG split. And I was just talking to someone the other day from Colorado, and they were articulating that CBG is more creative and CBN is more sedative. And so I was just noticing, oh, well, when I take this combination, how did I feel? And so that to me is the takeaway. There's going to be isolated cannabinoids, CBD, THCV. There's going to be multiple cannabinoids, maybe a full spectrum oil versus this THCV, CBD, CBDV combination. And yes, they will in theory all work relatively different in your body. And so I just encourage you, again, going back to that journaling, document. Did I have pure THCV? Did I have a ratioed product? What was the milligram of everything? So that way, you know, hey, when I take this is how I felt when I took this product versus when I took that product. So I think it's a really great question. Unfortunately, I don't have an explicit answer just because I haven't tried THCV isolated yet, but we are working on some THCV isolated stuff. So I appreciate that question. And then this is the last question that I have, unless anybody wants to submit any more. Someone said, is there anything we can do to help keep this legal? Petitions to sign or lawmakers to contract? It seems like the American pharma cartel, among others, is attacking these products. John, I appreciate this question. You're asking the $1 million question. Yes. So there are definitely organizations that you can be a part of. Some of the ones that we are members and participate the most with are, especially here in Texas, I would say is Texas NORML. So NORML is a national organization on marijuana law and policy, and they are very active in sending out petitions to help contact senators and policymakers, and really it can be overwhelming because sometimes it's like, well, I don't know who to contact and when to contact them. And they're a really good resource to indicate like, hey, here's an opportunity to sign this petition. The other thing that I'll say is also really important is during our legislative sessions. So here in Texas, we update laws every 2 years. So you have your legislative, which is law, and then you also have your regulatory. So, okay, we're going to get into it a little bit because you asked the question and I like to answer them. So it's legislation wise, those are open to anybody. I went and testified at the Capitol in this last legislative session last year. Anybody can participate in that. I do understand, again, figuring out date, time is really confusing. We always try to do our best to include that information in our social channels to let you guys know how you can get involved. So that's like affecting the law. You can literally go testify. You can say, I'm a patient, I'm a customer, I'm a business owner. I use these cannabinoids. This is how it impacts me, and tell your story. It's really important. But then there's the regulatory stuff. So cannabis in Texas is regulated by the Department of State Health Services, DSHS, as we call them. And DSHS is kind of changing things. So if you notice, Delta 8 is kind of in and out of legality. It's actually because of DSHS. So they're not changing the actual law, they're changing the regulatory function. But in the very similar way that you can go testify with the legislation, you can also testify during these DSHS regulatory updates. And again, I feel like we try to post those when we can. Texas NORML posts those when they can. And those are really good, just, things to be mindful of, realizing it's not just the me's of the world who are going and advocating for cannabis. It's really all of us, and we all have a voice and we can all make an impact. And then I'll just highlight another really great organization that I'm a board member of is the Texas Hemp Coalition. It's more for the business side, but as a community member, you can certainly follow them on social media. You can go to their website and see they do a really great job. So when I go to the Capitol and I testify, I'm going with my Texas Hemp Coalition board members, and we're going as an entity who's trying to represent professionalization and normalization and education in this industry. And so just know that even just following them on social media can help give you insight into, when these opportunities come up for you to use your voice. So really, really great question, and appreciate the interest in advocacy, because it's not just us, it's all of us who are helping to keep cannabis, legal and accessible in the state of Texas. But last question I have is from Scott. He says, thanks, Shada, great info. I've been studying to dial in what CBD and or combo that amplifies the 30-year development of my body, grounding, stretching practice. I'm having good luck with Thcv Gummies and D9, but he hasn't tried 3 of the Thcv Gummies yet. If he has any additional suggestions, I found this type of plant connection is the most effective way to attune into our body awareness. Physical fun feelings being the vehicle to see our direct connection to our Taurus Planck energy field natural. Yes, Scott, totally there with you. That's why I pursue cannabis. And I think that's been the most exciting thing of transitioning from the marijuana market of just going to Colorado and being a consumer, or even the black market, to now seeing hemp become legalized and normalized at a federal level as well as at a state level. And, I think it's just that it's being on the pursuit of figuring out what cannabinoid is going to work for me. Like I mentioned to answer the question earlier, I have my baseline routine, and then I have different combinations of things that I add in based on how I want to feel. And I'm confident to do that because I've explored it. And so if anything, I want to leave you guys with encouragement to explore, be curious. When it comes to any cannabinoids, but especially edibles, you can't take less, right? You can take more. And so I always encourage you to start with a low dose, because you don't want to ever overconsume and then have adverse feelings. And then that can deter you or turn you away from the plant. My hope is that you'll feel confident and try things in a manner that is going to empower you to feel confident with cannabis. And the reality is not every cannabinoid is going to do everything that you want it to be. Not every product's going to do everything that you want it to be. But it really is about trying to figure out what is that connection that this plant has to my body. And I think the first step is education. So with that, I thank everybody for tuning in. Again, you can find us on Instagram at Restart CBD, on youtube.com/Restart CBD. We have a ton more content and videos on our YouTube, and come see us in our store. And we'd love to see you and talk to you. Otherwise, I wish you all nothing but blessings and more curiosity as you continue your Canna curiosity journey. But that's all for now. And thanks everybody for tuning in. Much appreciated.